Welcome to the Journal podcast from the Chartered Insurance Institute, a place for thought-provoking discussion from the world of insurance and beyond. I'm Vanessa Riboloni, Head of Research and Insight at the CII Group. In this episode, we are discussing how the CII's Professional Map applies in practice. And I'm joined today by Borah and Barbora Duskova, both from AXA Health. So welcome, everyone. I'm very pleased to be hosting this today about the Professional Map in practice, real stories of career development. And I'm joined today with Barbora Duskova and Borah from AXA Health. Today, we're going to have very much a conversational session with Barbora and Meg to really understand how they've used it in practice. I'm going to start before giving a bit of background on what the Professional Map is, because maybe not everyone listening knows what it is. So in a nutshell, the Professional Map is a competency framework that describes the skills, the knowledge, and the behaviors that a well-rounded professional needs to succeed in their roles and add value to customers and to their own firms. It was developed in 2020 and it was recently updated because all of the changes that came through on the back of the consumer duty and also obviously AI revolutionizing our working life. So we have updated it to reflect these changes. And it's really based on the principle that well-rounded professional is that one that combines behaviors, but with technical expertise. So there's a big focus around behaviors within the Professional Map. I encourage everyone to go online and take a look. So if you search for CII Professional Map, it will come up. So that's kind of in a nutshell to give a bit of background. And before we start the conversation, I'll hand over to Meg and Barbora to introduce themselves. So Meg, can you tell a bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Meg. I am a physiotherapist by background. I work in AXA Health as a clinical quality governance manager. And part of my role is to have oversight of our third-party providers. And alongside this, I also am heavily involved with our inclusion networks. And I lead a work stream which focuses on development. And probably we'll talk more about that, how that relates more into this Professional Map. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really broad role across clinical governance and also your responsibilities with inclusion work, which is what brought you here. So thank you. Barbora.
Thank you. So I'm Barbora. I am from Czech Republic, but I lived in the UK for the past 10 years. And when I attended the workshop, I was customer complaints specialist. I still am, but not long after the workshop, I was actually accepted on a secondment to work on improving processes. So I did progress since the workshop.
That's amazing. Yeah, you did say something about systems thinking, which sounds fascinating. I'm really interested on a personal level, so we might have a separate conversation around that.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So if we cast our minds back, it was probably a year ago that we first met, wasn't it, Meg? So if we start with first impressions, what was the context and how did you come across the Professional Map in the first place?
It was about a year ago, I think. It was Q1 2025 is when I was in this CII ICANN event in Bristol. It was an on-site event. And where, Vanessa, you presented the Professional Map to all the attendees. And honestly, I think the first impression was that it's quite structured around bands rather than levels. And I think this is something that you definitely try to hone into. And I really like that. That really impressed me because then that removes that level of hierarchy.
Yeah, totally. It's actually very intentional to use the word band instead of levels. 4 bands that really describe what you need to succeed to meet the objectives of your role. And each band can be a destination in itself. Whereas if you think of levels, there's always that sense of like, oh, if I don't reach the highest level, I haven't succeeded. So that's not the case. So yeah, definitely that.
Yeah, and it was quite focused around like skills, behavior, and the areas that you need to develop rather than, again, like you already explained. And I think that whole session really impressed me because we had time to assess ourselves. And then we were then sent into groups where we were given the opportunity to choose a group we mostly align with. And that's what I did. And there were lots of conversations and it helped me to understand the areas that actually I'm good at and the areas like the gaps that I had where I needed to improve. So I think from that session, I walked away feeling very positive and how this tool could be used practically in our development program.
Yeah. And then after the session, you did approach me there and then. I'd like to organize something at AXA Health. So we then started the conversations and we organized 2 online sessions in summer and towards the back end of...
It was in September and October, actually.
Oh, okay. So can you talk a bit about those 2 sessions that we did at AXA Health, which is where Barbara encountered the professional map for the first time?
Yeah, I think I just went straight into LinkedIn, didn't I? And added you on LinkedIn and started a conversation right away. But I think we are a big organization and we had already quite a few things arranged. I think the best date was towards Q4. But what happened is when I went back and reflected, I was trying to create with few of my colleagues something like a development program for our network members. And after attending the professional map, I'm like, it's already there. And it's for the insurance industry. We shouldn't be duplicating. And this is like done by professionals. It's so good that I wanted to bring you in for a session. And I think when we approached, it was really good because you hadn't just started doing online sessions. So it was something that we were trying to develop together. And what we did is we spaced the session. We gave a month between both the sessions. And in the first session, you took everybody through the professional map, how to do the self-assessment. And then we gave a month for everybody to reflect and go and implement some of the gaps or some of the ideas that could come out from there. I thought the second session was very, very interactive and everyone was quite open and honest and were trying to share where they identified their gaps. And one of the things that they all shared is that they were not alone.
Yeah. And also, it was also important to create that safe space for sharing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, just being open about and identify gaps that probably you didn't know, you weren't aware that you had, because by going through the self-assessment, you are presented with the description of different behaviors that cluster around different competencies that maybe you hadn't thought about before. So it was really great to have those sessions. So the first session was very much about doing an online presentation. This is the professional map, explaining how it works, and also as you said, why invent something if there's already a framework that has been developed, and talking a bit about the effort and the research that went into the professional map. I always emphasize that it's not something that the CII set out from the top down. It's been very much informed by having interviews and conversations with people doing the jobs to really understand what good looks like in terms of being an insurance professional. And then the second session, as you say, they were spaced by a month or so. And the second session was very much about, right, you've seen what the professional map is, you've taken the online self-assessment, let's share the insights and findings with the group. That worked really well. So Barbara, how did you find the first time that you used the self-assessment? Were there competencies or anything that you thought like, this is exactly me, or anything that you realized, not quite sure about myself, this is an area that I need to develop? Like, what was your experience of going through that process?
So with the self-assessment, so I'll start with the first session, just say that I really liked the first session. Well, I like the second one as well, but I thought that the first session, the presentation was really good. It was interesting. It was, easy to understand. I loved the second session as well, because as Meg mentioned, everyone shared and they were open about their difficulties. And it was really nice to see that you are not alone in, maybe not feeling all that confident all the time. And with the assessment tool, it was easy to use. And although confidence is not one of the results that it gives you itself, the whole workshop made me realize that what I really need to work on is confidence. I mean, there were some other bits that I didn't know that I lacked, so it was interesting to see. But alongside those, the workshop helped me to realize that I need to work on my confidence, which since then I've done, and that helped me increase my visibility, become more progressive, get better at public speaking. I don't get as nervous. I still get a little bit nervous, but before it was really bad, which is so much better now. And obviously that led to progression and more opportunities.
A bit of healthy nervousness is always useful to keep you on your toes. So what you said that it helped you realize that what you needed to develop was your confidence. Was that as a result of sharing the insights with other colleagues, or was it as a result of like identifying something within the framework that you thought, this I need to develop?
So in the framework, I know just looking back at it, what I really needed to work on was just from the map that I needed to, get more information or more knowledge was data technology and impact. And I think and technology, that's just category on its own. But for example, the impact and also curiosity was something that I needed to work on. And you can imagine that that's something that I wasn't as good at the time because I wasn't confident and I wouldn't put myself out there. I wouldn't speak up. I wouldn't ask the questions because I was always kind of in my shell. So both, I'd say the results of the tool and then sharing and discussing it in the workshop both helped me to realize this.
Yeah, that makes sense because the competency of impact is all about your skill set in terms of like how you present yourself, the communication, communicating clearly is also about influencing others. So I suppose if you don't have the confidence to put yourself out there, so that kind of like triggered the realization, it's probably more about confidence rather than competence.
Like that, because if I was confident, I then would do all those things that the tool told me you should do more of, kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So Meg, was there anything by going through the self-assessment, just to explain for those that are listening, the self-assessment is an online tool that works a bit like a survey that lists each one of the competencies that are laid out in the professional map. And it asks you as a user to rate what is your level of competence against a competency and how confident do you feel about that. So how was your experience, Meg? Was there anything that stood out that you said, like, definitely this is one of my strengths, and anything that surprised you in terms of areas for development?
I did go and assess on all levels. I think this is the second time, not the first time. I think that's, again, down to confidence, isn't it? Because you just don't want to put yourself forward into level that you think you are, but then you still want to check that, okay, I put myself, for example, for level 3, but am I certain that I am really good at level 2? And that help. And if people have time, I would recommend go one down and one above. And then I could increase my workload, but it gave me quite clarity on the areas that I needed development. I knew I want to develop. I knew what's my next step. I've been exploring for some time. But once I assessed myself on 3 levels, I could pull out the areas that, okay, this is where I really need to push myself. And this is something that I just need to improve here and there, practice it, it will come.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's interesting. And I need to correct you. You talk about levels. Let's talk about bands.
Not levels. Yes, it's bands. Sorry.
That's okay. It slips in, doesn't it? That's so interesting because I have heard people before taking the self-assessment, there's some descriptors that allow you to self-identify in which band you think you sit. But obviously, it can feel a bit rigid sometimes. And I always say that it's not a science. You might be kind of in between 2 bands, or you might also want to assess yourself 1 band above in terms of more of the aspiration. But I've never heard someone actually say that they've done the band below, the band that they feel that they sit, and the band above, which is a bit more work, but I'm sure it provided really rich insights and confidence, I suppose. That's quite an interesting approach. And is there anything that on the back of using the professional map and the self-assessment, anything concrete that has changed about how you approach your career or your day-to-day development? Is there anything that you would highlight that you do differently now than before using the map?
Definitely. I try to keep that in my back pocket, to be honest, that if you want to grow, you need to practice every day. And I put myself for an apprenticeship. It's the same apprenticeship that Barb and I are doing. So right after the professional map, all these assessment, I started like looking around what's there, what's next. And that's when the application was open for this phase 2 service designing, systems thinking. And when I applied for the application, we have to give our strengths, areas of development. And it's kind of like, okay, it's already there because we have done our professional map. So definitely help to use the areas or the gaps that was identified from the professional map to put in as my short-term and long-term goals when I was designing my development plan for the apprenticeship.
How about you, Barbara? Is there anything that you do differently now that you didn't do before?
I do quite a bit. So the workshop or the tool, they actually encouraged me to, speak up, get out there and mostly just work on myself. For example, with the public speaking or the confidence, I would start asking for opportunities to actually do some public speaking, putting myself out there to practice, asking more questions, asking for more opportunities, just generally putting myself out more, which, resulted in all the good stuff. So I'd say I'm a different person really since last year.
That's amazing. That's something I also do in terms of creating opportunities to get involved in things that you don't know where they're going to lead. So like one thing leads to another, then to another. So if you don't have the confidence to take that first step, then you'll never get there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's really encouraging and great to hear. And also going back to what you were saying in terms of when you were preparing your development plan in the short and longer term, I suppose sometimes when we do development plans or we have development conversations or our performance reviews, it's sometimes a bit difficult or hard to actually put in words and describe what you're good at and what you would like to develop. So I hear that this is something that is quite useful, that you've got kind of a vocabulary there that you can pick and that you can use in a consistent way. So that's kind of another benefit of using the professional map. Was there any additional feedback from the people that joined the 2 sessions that you'd like to share? Anything from your colleagues?
I have a few feedbacks actually, which were really good. And we are trying to develop more sessions on how to engage our members into it. And one of my colleagues with whom I work with made recommendation that anyone who wants to develop first have to do the CII framework. They have to complete that, then only we can support. And I thought that's really good because we all are doing this network work as an addition to our day job because we are passionate about it. And it is very important that if someone wants to develop, they also have to show their passion. And it's not a big ask because it's difficult for somebody to just sit and develop a plan. But when you have a framework, which is already there, it has the tools, we are just encouraging them to use it. And that's a very good feedback. And I would have liked to share it with you.
So when you talk about the networks, you talk about the inclusivity, the employee resource networks that you've got at AXA Health. That's great. So I suppose to wrap things up, if you had one recommendation to someone that's listening that might be curious about the map or haven't started yet or haven't used it yet, what would you say to someone? Is it worth their time and how they might use it?
I can take this one first. So the simple answer would be yes, please do it. For me, I remember when I finished the second session, I remember talking to my manager and just really being, I loved it. It was so good. I feel really good about it. So even if you don't want to progress right now, if you've got the time, I say do it because I don't know if saying it was entertaining as well as helpful is the right word. But yes, it was, it was interesting. It was interactive. It was helpful above most. So I'd say yes, do it if you've got time, whether you'd like to develop or not, because you never know, you might want to develop in the future. Yeah.
Likewise, I think it's very important if you are serious about it, then just do it. Don't fall into that trap of judging yourself when you see your areas of development, like the gaps, because that's why you did it. Remember that?
Being curious about your own development is one of the competencies, isn't it? Just to finalize, we've talked about if you have time, sit down and do it. How much time did it take each one of you to go through the self-assessment and then get the report at the end?
20 minutes.
Okay.
But I don't think it took that long. I'd say, probably 20 minutes.
Okay. So in the grand scheme of things, it isn't that much time.
Honestly, you can even do it in lunchtime while grabbing your lunch.
Yeah. No, I definitely recommend for people to do it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was lovely to hear all the good things about the professional map. I wouldn't say otherwise, wouldn't I? So lovely to speak today. And hopefully we have the opportunity to engage again at some point.
Well, thank you so much for having us, Vanessa.
That's okay.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Journal Podcast. You can find useful links in the show notes and related articles on the Journal website, along with further podcasts. many of which can be recorded as CPD and logged directly on the site with a click. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, review, and subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.